Alrighty, welcome back. Sorry about the delay to Free Read Fridays. I'm your intrepid narrator, Fraggeth, and today I'm going to watch as my interface hiccups and jiggles like crazy. I hope I don't lose internet connection in the midway through again, because I'll be upset. Anyway, this week will be the final installment of The Jesus Incident by Bill Ransom and Frank Herbert. It's going to be a bit longer than the previous ones. And we've got a lot. It is going to be climactic, more climactic even than the previous installment, which was pretty dramatic. Everything went down. Let's see. Kerro got abducted by hylighters. Let's see. Waela is pregnant, and the pregnancy is advancing at breakneck speed because it's I don't know, it's chrono displaced or something. So it's developing very, very quickly. It's developing so quickly that it's having to suck energy from other living beings in a sort of helical spiral vortex pattern around it, but not the mother. Um, the mother's being fed quite a lot of high nutrient material straight from ship. In fact, she got whisked away up to ship, which of course Morgan Oakes and Jesus Lewis are not happy about because anything to do with ship they're not happy about. Um, let's see what else. Oh yeah, Raj Thomas slash Flattery uh, was captured at the Redoubt, held and interrogated by Lewis, I believe, and then kicked outside where all the demons are. And the last we saw him, he was running, 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 and then got snatched up by another highlighter. So he's it was nice knowing him, I guess, and Kerro. It's horrible what those highlighters. It's horrible what those highlighters do to you. Any of the other demons would have been swifter. They suck you dry, as Oakes says to Legata Hamill. And oh right, the last thing we saw was so because Waela Taulini is up on ship. Hallie has been promoted to one of the Natali and basically put in charge of Waela. Um, and Ferry is being basically blackmailed in some way by what's his name? Oh, geez, I can't even remember his name now. He's not terribly important. Murdoch. Um, and basically is tired of being harried and manipulated by Murdoch and Oakes and Lewis. And Murdoch wants to kill Wheela because she's growing something in her belly that, Murdoch, Lewis, and Oakes don't understand and therefore fear and therefore want to terminate. But Ferry is helping Hallie and Wheela to escape. And that's basically where we left it. So now that I've spoiled everything from last time, if you didn't tune in, you should have tuned in. Hopefully, I will have these organized this weekend, and they will be in their proper order, and you won't listen to them out of order. If it splits itself off into two parts, I may screw that up, in which case, I'm sorry. I have probably already done that. I have to go through like four of them, four now. Four. It's two episodes, but they're split into separate parts, so I have to figure out which one of those is part one and part two. I'll figure it out. Anyway, without further ado, let's get cracking on the final installment of the Jesus incident. And if there's anybody around when we're done and people want to talk about it, awesome. We can chat about what we think Ship wanted and wants and some other things. What did it all mean? What did people like? That sort of thing. We'll get to that at the end. As the Jesuits recognized, a key function of logic limits argument and, therefore, confines the thinking process. As far back as the Vedanta, this way of tying down the wild creativity of thought was codified into 7 logic-directing categories: quality, substance, action, generality, particularity, intimate relation, and non-existence, or negation. These were thought to define the true limits of the symbolic universe. The recognition that all symbol processes are inherently open-ended and infinite came much later. Raja Thomas, Ship Records. The highlighter with Thomas cradled in its tentacles vented a brief undulating song and began a slow drop into blue haze. Thomas felt the tentacles enfolding him, heard the song, was even aware that Alki was beginning its long slide into sunset. He saw the dark purple of the meridian sky, saw the side-lighted brilliance of the blue haze and a surrounding rim of steep crags. He saw all of this and still was not sure of what he saw, nor was he entirely sure of his own sanity. The haze enclosed him then, warm and moist. His memories were confused, like something seen through swirling water. They moved and shifted, combining in ways that frightened him. Calm. Be calm. He could not be sure this was his own thought. Where was I? He thought he remembered being thrust into the open outside. Oh, sorry. The way the line breaks there threw me. He thought he remembered being thrust into the open outside Oak's Redoubt. The land beneath him, then, could still be Black Dragon. He could not, however, remember being picked up by a highlighter. How did I get here? As though his confusion ignited some remote explanation, he saw a distant view of himself sprinting across a plain, a hooded dasher close behind, then a swoop of a highlighter as it lifted him to safety. The images played in his mind without his volition. Rescue? What am I doing here? Ballast? Food? Maybe the highlighter is taking me to its nest and a bunch of hungry... Hungry what? Nest! He heard the word clearly, as though someone spoke directly into his ear, but there was no one. He knew the voice was not his, not Ship's. Ship! They had fewer than 7 diurns left. Ship was about to break the recording. End of humankind. I've gone insane, that's it. I'm not really being carried through a blue haze by a highlighter. In his mind a hatch opened, and he heard a babble of voices, Peniel's among them. Memories. He felt his mind lock on to memories that had been sealed away until this babble of voices. The gondola. The highlighters reaching into the surfaced gondola. Waela and Peniel making love, tentacles all around like long black snakes slithering, questing. He heard his own hysterical laughter. Was that another memory? He recalled the LTA carrying them to the Redoubt. The cell, those odd E-clones. More laughter. I'm hallucinating. And remembering hallucinating. Not hallucinating. That voice again. The cradling tentacles shifted, but he still saw only blue haze, and nothing else was certain. The chatter continued in his mind, memories or present he did not know. His head whirled. Fragments of what appeared to be holorecords danced behind his eyes. I've finally gone all the way. Really insane. Not insane. No, I just talked to myself. The chatter had begun to separate into discriminate pieces. He thought he recognized specific snatches of conversation, but the internal holorecord terrified him. He felt that the entire planet had become eyes and ears just for him, that he was everywhere. In fits and starts, silence returned. He felt it wash through his mind. Slowly, the creep of some small creature up a gigantic wall, he felt those other eyes and ears remove themselves from his awareness. He was alone. What the hell is happening to me? No answer. But he sensed the cadences of his mind's voice echo down a long, dark system of tunnels and corridors. He was in darkness. And somewhere in this dark was an ear to hear and a voice to answer. Waela was there. He sensed her as though he could reach out with one hand and touch. The tentacles no longer enclosed him. One palm touched the ground. Rock, sand, darkness all around. Waela remained there, calm, receptive. I've turned into some kind of a damned mystic. Live mystic. That voice. It was as real as the wind he felt abruptly on his face. He knew then that he knelt on some dark ground with haze turning luminous blue all around. And he remembered, really remembered being picked up by a hylighter. Most precious memory. He nursed it as though it were his only child. Memory. A shimmering expanse of sea, narrow ribbon of coast winding itself out of sight, the most rugged mountains of Pandora lifting from the sea and plain. Black Dragon. Look up, Raja Thomas, and see how the child becomes father to the man. He tipped his head and saw ripplings of bright yellow and orange in the blue mist. A whistling song astounded his ears. It was a small hylighter directly overhead in the mist. Tentacles brushed the ground around him. The mist began to thin, pushed by the breeze he could feel on his skin. He smelled floral perfumes. Visibility moved outward through air thick and warm with water vapor. He looked right and left. Jungle. Without knowing how it came about, he understood his surroundings. A large crater nestled in black rock, a captive cloud layer creating an inversion with protected warmth beneath the crater's rim. One of the hovering highlighter's tentacles snaked toward him, touched the back of his left hand. It felt as warm and soft as his own flesh. A small trickle of condensation ran down the back of his neck. He looked up at the highlighter. Another tentacle dripping condensation dangled directly above him. Calmness fled. What's it going to do to me? His gaze moved all around. Warm blue mist. Crack! Far overhead, a bright flash of lightning flared horizontally across the haze. He felt the prickling presence of it along the hairs on the back of his neck and arms. Where is this place? Nest. He felt that he was not really hearing that voice. No, it played on his aural centers the way Ship's voice played, but it was not Ship. Still, he sensed reality in what his eyes reported. A highlighter tentacle touched his hand. Another hovered over him. The jungle. Sorry. The jungle remained right out there. Right out there. Perhaps he was seeing what he desired most, the legendary refuge, the place of the Horn of Plenty, where there were no worries and no passage of time. Eden. I've taken refuge in my own mind because of Ship's decision to end us. He ventured another look at the mist-wrapped jungle all around, mottled clumps of trees and vines with odd colors hidden in the green. Your senses do not lie, Raja Thomas. Those are real trees and vines. Do you see the flowers? The colors were blossoms, red, magenta, draping cascades of golden yellow. It was all too perfect, a delicate fiction. We find the flowers quite pleasant. Who is talking to me? Avata talks to you. Avata also admires the wheat and corn, the apple trees and cedars. Avata planted here what was swept away and abandoned by your kind. Who is Avata? Thomas stared up at the hovering highlighter, afraid of the answer he might get. This is Avata. Visions flooded his senses. The planet in light and darkness, the crags of Black Dragon and the plains of the Egg, seas and horizons, a confusion which overwhelmed his ability to discriminate. He tried to cringe away from it, but the visions persisted. The highlighters, he whispered. We choose to be called Avata by you, for we are many and yet one. Slowly the visions withdrew. Avata brings Peniel to help you. See? He swung his gaze wide and saw, on his left, another highlighter descending through the blue mist, a naked Kerro Peniel clutched in a loop of tentacle. Peniel swam in the air like a persistent aftervision. The highlighter dropped him centimeters from the ground. He landed on his feet and strode toward Thomas. The sound of Peniel's feet scuffing in sand could not be denied. The poet was real. He had not died on the plane or been killed by the highlighters. You are not hallucinating, Peniel said. Remember that. This is not Frago. It is a trading of self. Thomas climbed to his feet, and the trailing tentacle of his highlighter moved with him, not breaking the contact against the back of his hand. Where are we, Kerro? As you surmised, Eden. You read my thoughts? Some of them. Who are you, Thomas? Avata expresses great curiosity about the mystery of you. Who am I? He spoke what was in the front of his mind. I am the bearer of evil tidings. Ship is going to end humankind forever. We have less than 7 diurns. Why would Ship do such a thing? Peniel stopped less than a pace from Thomas, head cocked to one side, a quizzical, half-amused expression on his face. Because we cannot learn how to warship. The forgotten language of our animal past conveys the necessity for challenges. Not to be challenged is to atrophy, and the ultimate challenge is to overcome entropy, to break through those barriers which enclose and isolate life, limiting the energy for work and fulfillment. Kerro Peniel, I sing to the Avata. For a long heartbeat, Hallie stood immobile in the passage while she stared at Murdoch and the weapon he carried, that deadly laser scalpel. She could see Docking Bay 8 directly behind him. The freighter and escape lay there. They had less than 2 minutes now until the automatic system propelled that freighter into space for the long dive to Pandora. A quick glance at the unconscious Waela on the gurney beside her showed no change there, but the target of that laser scalpel appeared obvious. Hallie interposed her own body between Murdoch and Waela. She heard old Win Ferry gasp as she moved. Hallie kept her attention on the scalpel, cleared her throat, and found her voice astonishingly calm. "Those things are meant to save lives, Murdoch, not take them."
I'll be saving a lot of lives by getting rid of this Dowlini woman.
His voice reminded her of that faraway time when Ship had allowed her to be confronted by foul breath below the hill of skulls. Ship? The unspoken plea filled her mind. Ship made no response. It all depended on her, then. Ferry had stopped the gurney 2 paces from Murdoch and now stood at Hallie's left, trembling. Murdoch waved the scalpel at them.
This is made to excise unnatural growth from a healthy body. He glared at the unconscious Waela, defiles us.
Again, Hallie found her memory filled with the faces of the Hill of Skulls, passionate eyes and violence thinly restrained behind them. Murdoch's face was one of those. "You have no right," she said.
I have this.
He flicked the scalpel's laser blade in a searing arc past her right cheek.
That's all the right I need.
But Ship,
the ship be damned!
He took one step toward her, thrusting out with his free hand to sweep her aside. In this instant, Ferry moved. He was so fast that Hallie saw only the backwards jerk of Murdoch's chin, the blur of old Ferry's elbow. Murdoch went sprawling to the deck, the scalpel spinning from his hand. Hallie was as shocked by the old man's speed as by his action. Desperation moved Ferry.
"Go!" Ferry yelled at her. "Get Waela out of here!"
Murdoch was scrambling to his feet as Ferry lunged for him. Hallie moved instinctively. She grabbed the gurney, jerked it past the struggling men. Its howling wheels grated on her senses. How much time do we have? And she asked herself as she swept the gurney through the VIII hatch, what made Ferry so desperate? The sealed hatch into the freighter lay directly beyond the VIII opening. She wheeled the gurney across the bump of the interlock and in 10 steps brought it up short against the freighter's hatch. It was then that she realized she could not escape without Ferry. He carried the freighter's transit program. She stared at the control panel beside the hatch. Without the program, the freighter would land them at Colony. Her instincts told her that something worse than Murdoch awaited them there. Without that program, they could not enter the freighter. They would be cooked alive here in the docking bay. Without that program, she could not switch the freighter from automatic to life support. The inventory in her mind stopped as she heard the panel relays click into the final stages before separation. She whirled at a grunting sound and saw Murdoch and Ferry struggling in the short passage to the freighter's hatch. Murdoch slowly pushing the old man backward toward Hallie. Once more the panel clicked. One by one the hatches to the docking bay hissed shut. Bolts clicked into their locks, sealing the bay and the 4 of them from the rest of Ship. There was a scream from Murdoch, and she saw his ears skid like a fragile blossom across the red-smeared deck. It was then that she realized that Ferry had recovered the scalpel. She whirled to the panel, threw it open, and found a Hold Program key. In desperation, she hit the key. "I hope I haven't trapped us." An ominous ticking issued from the control panel. Ferry thrust her aside, slipped a small metal wafer into a slot in the panel. His trembling hand touched the Add Program key, and the freighter's hatch popped open. They pushed the gurney inside, and, as they moved, Waela sat up.
She looked at Ferry, then at Hallie, and said, "My child will sleep in the sea, where the hylighters calm the waves to the touch of a cradle. There my child will sleep." Her head fell forward onto her chest. They slipped her from the gurney and wrestled her gently across to a passenger couch, locked her in it. As they worked, Hallie heard the freighter's hatch hiss closed. The freighter quivered. Ferry propelled her toward one of the forward control couches, and they strapped in. "You ever fly one of these?" Ferry asked. She shook her head. Me neither. I had simulator experience, but that was a long time ago." His hand hesitated over the Launch Program key, and before he could move, the red Automatics light flashed on the board. Hallie looked forward to the Plaz curve nested into the bay, expecting it to separate. Nothing happened. "What's wrong?" She felt hysteria bubbling in her throat. "Why doesn't it launch?" "Ferry! Echo! Shut that thing down and come back inside!" "Murdoch," Ferry said. "Always spoiling things. He must have escaped from the bay. He's taken over the autopilot and we can't release the docking bolts." "Ferry, Echo, if we don't get Dowlini back into sick bay, she could die. You want that on your conscience? Don't let yourselves in for trouble over a—" Ferry snapped off the vocoder. Hallie took a deep breath. "What now?" "This will either be the ride of your life or no life at all. Hang on." Ferry cleared the console and hit the reset key, then override and manual. His finger hesitated several blinks over Launch Program. "Hit it," Hallie said. He depressed the key. A powerful trembling rippled through their cabin. Hallie looked at him. She had never suspected such action and determination in old Ferry. He seemed beyond desperation, caught up in some overriding program of his own. She realized then that the old man was sober.
"If only we had a flight manual,"
he said. A metallic female voice startled them, crackling from an overhead vocoder. "You have a manual."
"Who the hell are you?"
Ferry demanded. "I am Bitten. I am the system of this freighter. I am designed for conventional or conversational program in emergencies. You wish to separate from ship, correct?"
"Yes, but—"
A roar shuddered through the freighter. The forward Plaz displayed a blinding glimpse of Rega, then a panorama of stars as they shot free of ship. They began a slow 180 turn toward Pandora, and Hallie saw a gaping hole that had been docking bay 8. Row-boxes were already swarming over the area like insects, starting repairs on the ragged edges.
"Well," Ferry muttered, "what now?"
Hallie tried to swallow in a dry throat. Then, "What Waela said, the cradle of the sea. Does she know something about—" "Life support has been activated," Bitten announced. "Does the sleeping one require additional attention?" Hallie jerked around and studied her patient. Waela sat in quiet sleep, her chest rising and falling evenly. Hallie unstrapped, crept back to Waela's side, and ran a test series. Everything read as normal, as could be expected. Blood pressure up a bit, adrenaline on the high side, but dropping. No medication was indicated. Ferry's voice intruded on Hallie's thoughts then as he asked Bitten for their ETA to Pandora's atmosphere. Hallie turned and stared at the planet with a growing sense of wonder. Her shipboard life was ended. The only thing she knew for sure about her life now was that she still had it. Bitten's metallic rasping filled the cabin. 2 hours, 35 minutes to atmosphere. Additional 25 minutes for entry and docking at Colony. "We can't dock at Colony," Hallie said. She made her way back to her seat and strapped down. "What are our alternatives?" "Colony is the only docking station approved for this vessel," Bitten intoned. "What about a surface landing?" Certain conditions permit surface landing without damage to vessel and crew, but our departure destroyed all forward landing gear and docking valves. These are not necessary at Colony. But we can't land at Colony. She stared at Ferry, who sat frozen either in fear or complete resignation. Survival of unprotected crew elsewhere on Pandora's surface not likely, Bitten intoned. Hallie felt her mind whirling. Survival not likely. She had the sudden feeling that this whole thing was high drama, something staged and unreal. She looked at Ferry. He continued to stare out the forward plaz. That was it. Ferry was acting out of character. Too far out. But Murdoch's ear, that hole in ship. We can't go back to ship, and we can't dock at Colony, and we can't land in the open, she said. We're trapped, Ferry agreed, and she did not like the calm way he said it. Hello! Thanks for tuning in, Optical Antenna and Frank Misers. I appreciate it. Hopefully, y'all are having a good day. Behold, these are a small troop, and indeed they are enraging us, and we are a host on our guard. Muslim Book of the Dead, Ship Records. What you're talking about is war, Peniel said, shaking his head. He sat on the warm ground, his back against a jungle tree, moon-shadowed darkness all around. War? Thomas rubbed his forehead, looked at the shadowy ground. He did not like looking at Peniel, a naked Pan who seemed to flow in and out of contact with native life, touching a tree here, the tentacle of a passing hylighter there. Contact, physical contact, always touching. Shipmen have had no experience of war for many generations, Peniel said. Clones and E-clones have no experience of it at all, not even stories or traditions. I know it only from ship's hollows. With one moon full and another raising its pale face on the jagged horizon, Peniel saw Thomas haloed against night sky, a hazy outline amidst the stars. A very disturbed man. But we have to take over the Redoubt, Thomas said. It's our only hope. Ship will... How do you know this? It's why I was brought out of Hybe. To teach us warship? No, to acquaint you with the need to solve that problem. Ship insists we... There is no problem. What do you mean there's no problem? Thomas was outraged. Ship will... Look around you. Peniel gestured at the moon-shadowed basin, the gentle stirrings of the moist air in the leaves. If you care for your house, you are sheltered. Thomas forced himself to take a deep breath, to assume at least the outward appearance of calm. The jungle. Yes, there did not appear to be any demons in this place. This nest, as the highlighters called it. But this place was not enough. No place was safe from Oaks or from ship. And there was no escaping ship's demand. Peniel had to be made to understand that. Please believe me, Thomas said. Unless we learn how to warship, we are through. No more humankind anywhere. I don't want that to happen. Then why should we attack the Redoubt? Because you say those are the last people groundside, colonies destroyed. That's true, but what would you teach those people by attacking? Peniel's tone was maddeningly reasonable, a voice which kept its disturbing pace with the sounds of breeze-stirred leaves. Thomas tried to match that tone. Lewis and the boss are destroying the electrokelp and the hylighters. The native life is running out of time, too. Don't they... Avada understands what is happening here. They know they're being wiped out? Yes. Don't they want to prevent that? Yes. How do they expect to do that without controlling the Redoubt? Avada will not attack the Redoubt. What will they do? What Avada has always done. Nurture. Avada will continue to rescue people when possible. Avada will carry us where we need to go.
Didn't the kelp kill colonists? You heard what Waela said.
Another of Lewis's lies, Peniel said, and Thomas knew that he was right. He stared off at the jungle beyond Peniel. Somewhere in there, he knew, was a large band of survivors, E-clones and normals, all scooped from Pandora's surface and planted here as the highlighters planted the scavenged Earthside vegetation. Thomas had not seen this collection of people, but Peniel and the highlighters had described it. The highlighters could do this thing. But Thomas shook his head in despair.
They have so much power.
Who?
The electro-kelp and the highlighters.
Avata, you mean?
Peniel's voice remained patient. Why won't they use their power to defend themselves?
Avata is one creature who understands about power.
What? What do you...
To have power is to use it. That is the meaning of possession. To use it is to lose it. Thomas closed his eyes, clenched his fists. Peniel refused to understand. Refusing to understand, he doomed them all.
Such a loss. Not just humankind, but this Avata. They have so much, Thomas whispered.
Who?
The Avata.
He thought about what the highlighters already had shown him, spoke the thought aloud.
That highlighter, the one that brought me, do you know what it showed me after we were fed?
Yes.
Thomas went on, not hearing. Just in a few blinks of touching it, I hallucinated the development, very nearly complete, of the entire recent geological and botanical phenomena of Pandora. Think of losing that!
Not hallucination, Peniel corrected him.
What is it then?
Thomas opened his eyes, stared at the passing moons. Avada teaches by touch at first, a true but sometimes overwhelming flow of information. As the student learns to focus, the information becomes discrete, discriminated. You separate the needed bits from the babble.
Babble, yes. Most of it's babble, but
You know about focus, Peniel said. You select which noises to hear and understand. You select which things to see and recognize. This is just a different kind of focus.
How can we sit here and discuss this? I mean, it's going to end forever!
This is the true flow of knowledge between us, Raja Thomas. Avata moves from the mastery of touch to direct communication, mind to mind, precise identification with another being. You have seen demons eat scraps of exploded highlighters? Thomas was interested in spite of his frustration.
I've seen it.
Direct ingestion of knowledge, precise identification. Some ancient creatures of Earth did it. Planarians.
You don't say.
No, I don't limit. Thomas jerked away as a passing highlighter trailed tentacles across his face, pausing also to touch the seated Peniel. For an instant, Thomas sensed a blur of pictures, dream fragments dancing behind his eyes. And the chatter. Avata remains fascinated by the mystery of you, Raja Thomas, Peniel said. Who are you?
Ship's best friend.
Peniel heard truth in those words and found himself transported in memory back to the shipside teaching cubby. A momentary flicker of jealousy burned at his awareness and was gone. Ship's best friend would start a war?
It's the only way.
Who would fight your war?
It's between us and them.
But who would be your soldiers?
Thomas gestured at the jungle, hoping he pointed somewhere near the collection of remnant people brought here by the highlighters.
And you would move against Oaks with violence?
Oaks is a phony. The chaplain psychiatrist is responsible for the first order of warship, survival. Oaks would sacrifice the entire future of humankind to satisfy his own selfish goals.
That is true. Oaks is selfish.
Thomas remained caught up in resentment of Oakes. Survival takes planning and sacrifice. The CP should be willing to sacrifice the most. We give our children to ship as a matter of worship. Oakes engineers more people from cloning and on a fixed food supply. Children starve while his playthings. Thomas broke off in frustration. As he stood there, wondering how he could make this poet understand what had to be done, Alki lifted above the eastern horizon, flooding the crater's mists with milky light. The illumination picked out every leaf-dripping detail nearby, but hazed away to a mysterious background of muted colors. "We're in danger, terrible danger," he muttered. "Life is always in danger." "Well, we agree on something." Thomas lowered his chin to his chest, looked down at his feet, and, in that strange elasticity of time which comes with danger, he saw his boots. He remembered those booted feet dangling below him as the highlighter lifted him from the threat of a hooded dasher at the redoubt. Terrible danger. He suddenly recalled another moment akin to this one, when he had pressed the abort trigger aboard the void ship Earthling, those countless millennia and replays past. In the century between instructing his body to push the abort trigger and actually pushing it, he had studied the galaxies waving to him from the back of his hand and fingers. One crazy hair, only millimeters long, had poked out from the side of a knuckle on his right index finger, and he recalled the trickle of something small and wet down the side of his left cheek. Why did the highlighter bring me here? To preserve your seed. To preserve your seed. Sorry. But Oakes and the Lab 1 people will kill us. Nothing will survive. What they miss, ship will finish. Yet we are in Eden, Peniel said. He moved gracefully to his feet, swept an arm wide. There is food. It is warm. It's little over a kilometer over the cliffs to the beach, not more than 10 kilometers to the redoubt. 2 different worlds, and you would make them the same. No, you don't understand what I... Thomas broke off as a shadow passed over them. He jerked his gaze upward as a trio of highlighters swept overhead, carrying a long plasteel cutter and several wriggling human shapes. Behind them, cresting the crater's crags, more highlighters appeared. The tentacles of all were burdened with people and equipment. Peniel touched a dangling tentacle as a highlighter circled over them and dumped the wind from its sail membrane. He spoke in a distant, musing voice. Lewis has installed Lab 1 at the Redoubt. These people were driven out. They are terrified. We must take care of them. A feeling of elation swept through Thomas. You ask about troops? Here they are! And the highlighters are bringing weapons! You said they wouldn't help us attack, but... Now I know that you once really were a CP, Peniel said. The keeper of the ritual and the robes, the trappings and the suits of woe. I tell you there's no other way. We have to take over the redoubt and learn how to warship. Peniel stared at him, eyes unfocused. Don't you know that humans made ship? Therefore, humans made all that proceeds from ship. Ship tells us nothing, demands nothing which is not from and of ourselves. Thomas no longer could contain his anger and frustration. You ask me if I know that humans made ship? I was one of those humans. Sorry, I was one of those humans. It was an explosive revelation for Peniel. Thomas, a piece of history resurrected. Ship's hand in this was almost visible. Past, present, future woven into a lovely pattern. This thing wanted only a poem to bring it into existence. Peniel smiled at his own enlightenment, and spoke in a burst of energy. Then you must know why you made ship. Thomas heard it as a question. We had a void ship, the Earthling, and we were commanded to turn it into a conscious being. We did it because it was succeed... We did it because it was succeed or die. At the moment of consciousness, ship delivered us from one danger into another, demanding that we learn how to warship. It's what we were supposed to do with our new lives, us and all of our descendants after us. Peniel did not answer, but continued to stare at the arriving swarms of hylighters, each with its cargo of people or equipment. The soft flutings of the highlighters and the terrified babble of the people being lowered to the ground began to fill the open area all around. So you talk to ship as I do, Peniel mused, yet you do not hear your own words. Now I see why ship needed a poet here. What we really need is an experienced military leader, Thomas said. Lacking that, I guess I'll have to serve. He turned and strode toward the nearest batch of terrified survivors. Where are you going? Peniel asked. Recruiting. Oh, thanks for tuning in, Nicole Berlino. Through the process of nostalgic filtering, Earth assumed for the shipman fairyland characteristics. I'm going to repeat that because I definitely mangled the emphasis there. I went on autopilot. I apologize. Through the process of nostalgic filtering, Earth assumed for the shipman fairyland characteristics. The different strains of people, telling their different historical memories, could only make such stories mix in a paradise setting. No shipman ever experienced every earthly place and clime and society. Thus, over the many generations, the reinforcement of positive memories left only the faith in how things were. Kerro Peniel, History of the Avata. Legata sat at a comm desk in the working space assigned to her at the Redoubt. It was a small room and showed signs of hasty construction. Directly in front of her across the desk was an oval hatch leading into her own private cubby, a space she seldom occupied now. But Oakes was busy somewhere, and she had seized this opportunity. She punched for ship records, keyed for her own private code, and waited. Did they still have contact with ship? The instrument buzzed. Glyphs danced across the screen in the desk. She punched for the aux gate, set up a random barrier lock, and began transferring the data on Oakes into the Redoubt's own storage system. There you are, Morgan Lawn Oakes. And the printout remained secreted in Oakes's old cubby shipside, should she ever need it. It was remotely possible that Oakes might stumble on this record here, might erase it, and even trace back to the original to erase that. But the printout would remain, stamped with ship's imprimatur. When she had reviewed the data to reassure herself, and once more checked the random barrier, she keyed the lock, then turned to the question of Lewis. It was not enough to have power over Oakes. Lewis held to his own power base like a man aware of every threat. She did not like the way he stared at her, secretive and measuring. The aux gate gave her its open files response, and she asked for anything available about Jesus Lewis. Immediately, the activity light on the command console winked out. She jiggled the switch. Nothing. She tried the override sequence, Oak's private code, the vocoder. Nothing. When I asked for material on Lewis. It had to be a coincidence. She went through the entire contact routine once more. Ship's records could not be brought into this console. She stood up, went out and into the passage, through the tension and bustle of E-clone processing, and borrowed one of their consoles. Same result. We're cut off. She thanked the pale, thin-fingered E-clone who had stepped aside at her request and returned to her own cubby. She knew that the right thing to do would be to tell Oakes. With colony gone and no communication to ship, they were isolated, alone in the wilderness that pressed inward all around the redoubt. Yes, Oakes would have to be told. She sat down at her desk, called on voice only when nothing else responded, and when he snapped that he was busy, insisted that her information transcended any other business. Oakes heard her out in silence, then,
"We're trapped."
"How can we be trapped?" she asked. "There's no one to trap us."
"They've set us up," he insisted. "Wait there for me."
The coder blapped at his sudden disconnection, and it was only then that she realized that Oakes had not asked where she was. Did he spy on her all the time? How much of what I did, how much did he see? In less than a minute, Oakes stepped through the hatch, his white single suit drenched in sweat. He was speaking as he entered, crackling tension in his voice.
"That Taolini woman, Peniel and Thomas, they're out to destroy us."
He stopped just inside the room, glared down at her across the comm desk. "That's impossible. I saw the highlighter carry Thomas off, and Peniel—"
"They're alive, I tell you, alive and plotting against us.
"How—"
More clones have revolted, and we've had a strange message from Ferry, threatening. They're somewhere nearby, some valley, Lewis thinks. People and equipment. They're going to attack."
"How could anyone—"
"Probe flights. Lewis is sending out probes, and there is something out there. They're able to drive our search instruments crazy. Some kind of interference that Lewis can't explain. But we're still getting indications of a lot of life and metal."
"Where?"
"South." He gestured vaguely. "What were you doing when the ship broke contact?"
"Nothing," she lied. "The circuitry just went dead."
"We need that contact. The people still up there. The material and food. Get them back."
"I've tried. Here, see for yourself." She slid out of the seat and gestured for him to take it.
"No, no."
He seemed actually afraid to sit at her comm desk.
"I trust your efforts. I just—"
She slipped back into her seat. "You just what?"
Nothing. See if you can contact Lewis. Tell him to meet me at the command center."
Oakes turned on his heel. The hatch hissed closed behind him. She keyed a search for Lewis and fed the message into it, then tried once more to contact ship. No response. She sat back and stared at the comm desk. A feeling of regret swept over her, pre-remorse, a sense of sorrow over the Morgan Oakes who might have been. He was nearing the very kind of desperation she wanted. Let someone attack the redoubt. Whatever happened, she would be ready with the material she had stored here. At the worst possible moment, Morgan Lon Oakes, you may be able to appreciate my timing, although you never have before. Would it happen in front of Thomas? Was it possible that Thomas had survived and would lead an attack? She thought it distinctly possible. Thomas, another CP. The unfailing Thomas who had seen her run the P, who had helped her in that desperate hour, and then said nothing of it to anyone. Discreet, kind and discreet, almost a lost breed. Doubts began to fill her mind then. Perhaps the survival of humans groundside really did depend on Oakes and Lewis. But Colony was gone, and the Redoubt was clearly under siege from the planet, if not from some nebulous force headed by Thomas. She thought of the Scream Room then. Where did the Scream Room figure in any scheme of survival? The Scream Room was unjustifiable by any standards. It betrayed negative anti-survival impulses. Everything about it that proceeded from it brought death or hunger or a terrifying subservience. No, not survival. Oakes put me through the Scream Room. Nothing would ever change that. But Thomas had guarded the perimeter hatch for her. His were survival instincts. She determined then that she would see what she could do to keep the Thomas breed from dying out. At what cost? She wondered then. her doubts returning. At what cost?
Frank Misers says, I may have found another cool science fiction writer for you, Christopher Ruocchio. I don't recognize that name offhand. I will look into that later. Thank you. I will put a pin in that and get back to it.
A horrible feeling came over me, a terrible amusement, for I believed that humankind, through the filtering of ships' manipulations and the great passage of time, had lost the very ability to engage in war. I thought war had been bred and conditioned out of them at the very moment when they needed this ability the most. The Thomas diatribes. Ship records. While Halley was making another examination of Waela's condition, and well before the freighter reached atmosphere, Bitten's metallic voice barked at them from the overhead coder. Do you know a Kerro Peniel? Waela stirred and mumbled at the sound, then rubbed both hands over her mounded abdomen. Yes, we know Peniel, Halley said. She closed and sealed her pry box. Why? You wish to land at some place other than Colony, Bitten intoned. That now may be possible. Ferry glanced up toward the coder.
You said we had to land at Colony.
I have been in contact with Kerro Peniel, Bitten said. He asserts that Colony has been destroyed. Destroyed? Halley sat stiffly in her... in.
Mm.
Sorry, my lips have betrayed me. Destroyed? Halley sat stiffly in her couch, dumb with shock. Ferry gripped the arms of his command couch, knuckles white.
But we're programmed for landing at Colony.
I remind you that I am the emergency program, Bitten said. Present conditions fit the definition of emergency. Then where can we land? Halley asked, and she felt the stirrings of hope. Contact with Kerro. Peniel asserts that I can make a sea landing near an occupied site called the Redoubt. He is prepared to guide us to that landing. Halley checked the fastenings which held Waela in the passenger couch, returned to her own seat, and strapped in. The Plaz directly in front of her framed a brilliant circle of cloud-covered planet.
They meant us to die, Ferry muttered. Damn them!
Do you desire to land at the alternate site? Bitten asked. Yes, land us there, Halley said. There is risk, Bitten said.
Land us there!
Ferry shouted. A normal tone of voice suffices for conversational direction of this program, Bitten said. Bitten's not going to take any of that.
Don't shout, bro! Damn!
A normal tone of voice suffices for conversational direction of this program, Bitten said. Ferry stared at Halley.
They meant us to die.
I heard you. What do you mean?
Murdoch said we would have to go to Colony.
Halley looked at him, weighing his words. Was the man unaware of what he had just told her? So it was a setup, she said. You staged that fight. Ferry remained silent, blinking at her. But you cut off one of Murdoch's ears, Halley said, remembering. Ferry bared his old teeth in a terrible grin.
He did something to my Rachel. I know he did.
Halley crossed her arms over her breast, hearing all the unspoken things in Ferry's words. Her gaze went to the laser scalpel clipped into a breast pocket of Ferry's singlesuit, a thin stylus with death or life in its mechanism. He was supposed to bring the scalpel in case he needed it against me.
I made it seem like an accident, Ferry said, but I knew they did something to my Rachel. And Murdoch's the one they get to do the nasty stuff. He nodded at Hallie. In the scream room. That's where they do it.
As he said scream room, he shuddered.
So we were supposed to go to Colony and it's destroyed, Ferry said. Demons, yes, very neat. They didn't like my asking about Rachel.
Hallie wet her lips with her tongue.
What's
What's the scream room?
in Lab 1 where they do the nasty stuff? It was because of Rachel, I know it was. And I drink too much. Lots of us do that after the scream room.
Bitten's voice intruded. Correction noted.
What was that?
Ferry demanded. This is Bitten. I have acknowledged a course correction from Kerro. You're going to land us in the sea? Hallie asked, filled with sudden concern for her unconscious patient. Near shore. Peniel asserts there will be help where we land.
What about the demons? Ferry asked.
If that is a reference to native fauna, you can protect yourselves with the weapons in this freighter's cargo. You carry weapons? Hallie asked. The cargo manifest lists food concentrates, building equipment and tools, medical supplies, ground suits, and weapons. Hallie shook her head. I knew you needed weapons to survive groundside, but I didn't know they were being made shipside.
Do you know what a weapon is? Ferry asked, looking directly at Hallie.
She thought of her history hollows and the soldiers at the Hill of Skulls. Oh, yes, I know about weapons.
This laser scalpel.
Ferry touched the stylus shape at his breast.
Acid concentrates, plasteel cutters for construction teams, knives, axes.
Hallie swallowed past a lump in her throat. Every bit of her med tech training cried out against this. If we prepare to kill, the word was barely a sigh past her lips, then we will kill.
Down here it's kill or be killed, Ferry said. That's the way the boss wants it.
In that instant, the freighter skipped into the first thin surface of Pandora's atmosphere. Vibration hummed all through the cabin, then smoothed. Can't we run away? Can't we run away? Hallie asked. Her voice was a low whisper.
Nowhere to run, Ferry said. You must know that. All shipmen learn enough about groundside to know that.
Fight or flee? Fight or flee, Hallie thought, and nowhere to flee. And it occurred to her that Pandora was a place where people were made into primitives.
Trust me,
Ferry said, and the quavering in his old voice made the statement pathetic. Yes, of course, Hallie said. She felt the freighter's braking thrust then as it pressed her against the restraining harness, and she glanced back to reassure herself that Waela remained secure. We will land in the cradle of the sea, Hallie said. That's what Waela said, remember?
What does she know?
Ferry demanded, and it was his fearful, querulous tone, the one which had made her despise him. This the true human knows. The strings of all the ways make up a cable of great strength and great purpose. Kerro, The Collected Poems. For a long time Peniel sat in the shadows of the seaside cliff while he felt the approaching presence from space. The sea lay below him down a rugged path, the cliffs soared high behind. Avata had been the first to tell him about this problem, and, for a few blinks, he had fallen back into Thomas's ways of thinking. The Redoubt will know about this freighter, will send its weapons against it. But Avata soothed him, told him that Avata would transmit false images to the Redoubt's systems, concealing the freighter's passage. Avata would continue to mask the nest's location with similar projections. The rock was cold against Peniel's back. From time to time he opened and closed his eyes. When his eyes were open, he was vaguely aware of the amber glow from double dusk, the sky alight from two suns dodging just below Pandora's horizon. Ship would know he was here and what he was doing. Nothing escaped Ship. Did that omnipotent awareness work through phenomena similar to those of Avata? Was it awareness of even the most minute changes in electrical impulses? Or was it some other form of energy which Ship and Avata monitored? That presence from space was coming closer, closer. He felt it, then he saw it. The freighter skipped up the horizon, a great stone crossing the surface of a glassy sea. The fall into atmosphere was deceptive. The freighter had entered Pandora's pull at the lowest point on the horizon. It streaked a long upward arc as Peniel felt it fill his awareness. It grew larger with its approach around the planet's curvature, and he saw it now falling white-hot toward him. The crunch of gravel told him of Thomas's approach, but Peniel had only a single purpose now. The approaching freighter was himself, and he was diving through the sky alight with amber. "Can you do it?" Thomas asked. "I am doing it," Peniel whispered. He begrudged the distraction of answering. Until he had seen the pinpoint of that first glow against the Pandoran dusk, Peniel had not been sure he could master this thing. "I'm thinking them in," he whispered. There was awe and wonder in his voice. "I'm thinking them in," he whispered. Much better.
Who is coming? Thomas asked.
Avada did not say.
Thomas emitted a wry, jibing chuckle. That's a surprise package from Ship. Maybe more recruits for me.
He moved around Peniel and climbed down out of sight along the narrow path, his figure a mysterious movement in the half-light. "Going to the shore where the surf crashes. The surf will make this landing perilous." As the last sound of Thomas faded from Peniel's awareness, darkness fell, the double dark in which Pandora's greatest mysteries blossomed. Peniel thought of himself now as a beacon. He was a signal transmitter in a known position. The freighter and its unknown passengers depended on his constancy. Avata wanted this freighter to land here. He trusted Avata. "Come to the sea," he thought. "The sea, the sea." Hylighters began whistling along a rock ledge ahead of him, and he knew it was time to join Thomas on the shore. He got up stiffly. It had been a long wait on the observation ledge. Knowing this, he had scavenged a single suit of white shipcloth which Avata had stored in the nest. A highlighter positioned itself above and behind him as he began the slow climb down to the shore. Peniel sensed tentacles dangling near, ready to grasp him should he fall. "Avata, brother," he thought. It fluted a brief reply. The sharp rocks and the difficulty of the dark cliff path were second nature to Peniel's body. He did not have to think about the climb. And he found that he could maintain the beacon while his thoughts wandered. His mind strayed back to Thomas's unbelieving interrogation. Thomas demanded explanations and refused to believe almost everything he heard. "He believes Avata projects strange images into his mind. He believes I have learned from Avata that I am a master of hallucination. He believes only what he can touch, and then he doubts that." Peniel recalled his own words. "Avata is not hallucinogenic. They are not even they. That's why I use the term Avata. That's why I call a highlighter Avata."
"I know that word."
Thomas was accusatory. "The oneness which is present in the many. It's a word from one of the old languages of my mother's people."
"Your mother?"
Thomas was astounded. "Didn't Ship tell you? I was womb bred, womb grown, and nursed. I thought you said ship told you everything. Thomas flashed him a dark scowl which showed that Peniel was striking at sensitive areas. But nothing had stopped Thomas from forming his army. No warnings about Avata's nature, no jibes at Thomas's limited information. Half of the army waited above them now, a mixed crew of E-clones and normals, all of them praying that the freighter from ship was bringing weapons and other support. Some had descended earlier to wait among the rocks at the base of the cliff. Above Peniel in the darkness, his Avatan guardian shared amusement and dismay at these thoughts. Can that army save you? Peniel asked. Avata will die. Oh, Avata will die in only a few diurns. Then it may be that a rebirth can occur. Oaks hasn't beaten you yet, Peniel said. Lewis with his poisons and his virus, none of them understand about power. Soft flutings rippled from the highlighter. The nearest Avata came to betraying doubts. Oh. Yeah, no, we'll take that. Soft flutings rippled from the highlighter. The nearest Avata came to betraying doubts. Peniel wondered then, was this futility aroused by Thomas's efforts, or by the imminent end of Avata? No more of electrokelp highlighters, no more of the individual cells, the great plural singular unity. This thought disturbed him, and he thought angrily as he worked his way down the steep trail to the shore. If you think you're done, then you are finished. Alternatively, if you think you're done, then you are finished. Better. He emerged from a gap between high rocks onto a wide, rock-mounded, sandy beach. Thomas stood far down the sand near the surf, one dark shadow among the many rocks. The surf was high, long rollers crashing onto the shingle. The air was damp with salt spray. Peniel felt the surf's heavy rhythm transmitted through skin and feet simultaneously. He put a hand against one of the gateway rocks through which he had entered this sea realm. The rock was cold and wet, and it also vibrated to the surf. Without the kelp to subdue the sea, the waves had become destructively wild, raging against the cliffs at high tide, throwing giant rocks in their surgings. Soon, very soon, all that Avata had built here would come crashing down into the wilderness of the sea. The Avatan guardian hovered near his shoulder. One tendril touched his cheek, transmitting remembered emotions. Yes, this is the place. It was here, Peniel recalled, that he had learned to appreciate all the centuries of poetry celebrating rock and sand and sea, and the peculiar Avata life of self, illuminated by the regular passage of moons and suns. Here the occasional monotony of wave against shore had been broken by the healthy slap of a night-born hylighter breaking free of its mother plant and drifting off with its long umbilicus tentacles trailing in the sea. Though all Avata was one creature, Peniel had felt his own private kinship with the night-born hylighter Avatan. Here he had listened for them and greeted each birth with a song. A far-off slap would catch his attention and fill him with all the wonder of an answered prayer. Across the gently rolling sea, the tiny creature would rise into darkness. Never again? Peniel whispered a chant to those lost cells of Avata, feeling his whole body transmit the chant as though he were, at last, truly one with Avata. The solitary blossom overpowers the bouquet, even remembering union without embrace, a transformation. Oh, the golden, night-blooming truth! As he chanted, the whole line of beach glowed with the moonrise and the shimmering friendship of Avata. The glow illuminated the people of Thomas's ragtag army. Peniel saw Thomas outlined against the dim light. Pushing himself away from the gateway rock, Peniel went down the beach to stand near this mysterious friend of ship. They're less than 2 minutes away, Peniel said. He felt the beacon within him, a timed fire which linked him to that hot metal behemoth diving toward him.
Oakes will send probes,
Thomas said. Avata will help me jam their signals. Peniel gave a smile to the dark. Would you care to join me in this?
No.
You hold back too much, Raja Thomas. But I need your help, Peniel said, and he felt Thomas fuming, the tension mounting.
What do I do?
Thomas forced the words out. It may help you to touch an Avatan tentacle. Not necessary, but it helps at first. A black tentacle came looping down to him then from the night sky. Reluctance apparent in every movement, Thomas reached out and placed a palm against the thrusting warmth. Immediately he felt his awareness joined to whoever guided that freighter toward them. He could see two hylighters hovering directly ahead of him, and he felt his body standing on the surf-drummed sand, a place to go. But the pulse of flight held him in thraldom.
If anybody told me back at Moonbase that one day I'd land a freighter with my mind and a couple of plants that sing in the dark. And think.
The Avata intrusion could not be avoided. Avata would not accept that designation as plant. Thomas sensed more than the oral projection, something not quite pride, but not completely separated from pride.
Avata confuses me,
he apologized. You confuse yourself. Why do you hide your true identity? Thomas jerked his hand away from the warm tentacle, but the Avata presence remained in his awareness.
You're prying where you don't belong, Thomas accused.
Avata does not pry. Avata does not pry. There was no denying the hurt in this response. Peniel felt like an eavesdropper on a private argument. Thomas was smoldering with anger now, aware that he could not break off the Avata contact at will, aware that Avata wanted to pierce the wall behind which this private idea of himself lay hidden. Let's get the freighter down, Peniel said. Probes are coming from the Redoubt. Peniel released his part of the beacon system then, telling himself that he had to concentrate on the probes. Thomas would have to make his own mistakes. The first of the probes screamed down the beach, blazing toward them on a course which undoubtedly had been computed against a plot of the incoming freighter. As Avata had taught him, Peniel set up a terrain image all around and transmitted it to the probe. He felt the projected illusion mesh with the probe's electronic functions. The probe almost shattered from the G's it pulled, avoiding a sudden cliff which was not there. They're getting closer, he thought. He knew why. Each illusion of mistaken terrain formed a pattern of error from which the computer at Redoubt could derive significant results. Avata numbers appeared in Peniel's awareness, telling him that he was being monitored constantly now. Yes, he agreed, the patrols have increased. Tenfold in 12 hours, Avata insisted. Why does Thomas not understand his role in this? It's his nature. It is his nature, perhaps. Have you identified your contact on the freighter? Peniel thought about this question, reviewed his own performance as a beacon, and experienced a sudden wash of insight. Knowing it was urgent, he re-insinuated himself into Thomas's performance, feeling the affirmation of contact with the freighter. Thomas, who have you contacted on the freighter? Peniel asked. Thomas considered this. He could feel the approaching presence, almost palpable. If it was illusion, it was a most complete illusion. Who? Peniel insisted. Thomas knew he could not be in contact with a shipman up there. Shipmen would panic when alien thoughts intruded. Who could it be, then? Bitten. The freighter's identification signal came to him clear and unmistakable. A simple, intense concentration without emotion. Ah, Thomas said. To Peniel, the startling thing was Thomas's emotional response. Deep amusement. Bitten was a flight system computer, and the realization that his mind was in contact with a computer should not have amused the man. This could only be more evidence of the mystery which so attracted Avata. They were both forced to concentrate on their mental linkage with Bitten, then, but Peniel could not explain why this aroused a deep fear reaction in him. He felt it, though, a fear which radiated from his own flesh and outward into every cell of Avata. Ship. I have taught you about the classical Pandora and her box. Peniel. I know how this planet got its name. Ship. Where would you hide when the serpents and shadows oozed out of the box? Peniel. Under the lid, of course. Kerro Peniel. Ship records. I guess that actually makes a lot of sense. Come to think of it. Where do you hide now that you've unleashed all the evils of the world out into the universe? You hide in the box where they were kept. Of course, strictly speaking, I don't think there's anything preventing you from getting back in, but they wouldn't want to, would they? Waela felt that she lived only in a dream, unable to trust any reality. She held her eyes closed, a tight seal against the world beyond her flesh. This was not enough. Part of her awareness told her that she was controlling the landing approach of a freighter. Insane. Another part recorded the moments before the suns lifted in the shadow of Black Dragon. Peniel was there, too, somewhere low in the shadow. I'm hallucinating. Hallie. Waela felt anxiety coming from Hallie, and Hallie was nearby. It was an odd anxiety, tension overlain with a deliberate effort to remain calm. Hallie is terribly afraid, and even more afraid that she will show it. She wants someone to take charge. Of course, Hallie has never been off ship before. Waela tried to move her lips, tried to form reassuring words, but her mouth was too dry. Speech required enormous effort. She felt trapped, convinced that she lay strapped into a passenger couch in a freighter diving toward heavy surf. A piece of Kerro's poem a piece of Kerro's poem floated through Waela's awareness then, and she focused on it in both fascination and fear, having no memory of where she had heard this poem. Your course will be true when you sight the blue line of sunrise at night, low in the shadow of Black Dragon. Hallie was there, too, listening to the fragment and rejecting it. A wave of emotion rushed over Waela, made her want to reach out and hold Hallie close, to cry with her. She knew this emotion, love of the same man. But she saw Pandora very close now, a raging white line of surf. Waela wanted to cringe away from it. She could feel the child in her womb, another awareness whose share of life reached out, and out, and out, and out. A cry escaped her, but the sound was lost in the abrupt roaring, metal straining protest as the freighter made its first contact with the sea. For a few blinks the ride smoothed. There was a gliding sensation followed by a cushioned deceleration and lifting, then a grating, grinding cacophony which ended in a thumping and stillness. Where are the people? That was Hallie's voice. Waela opened her eyes, looked upward at the ceiling of the freighter's sparse cabin. Metal beams, soft illumination, a winking red light. Somewhere there was a sound of surf. The freighter creaked and popped. Abruptly it tipped a full degree.
There's someone.
That was old Ferry. Waela turned her head, saw Ferry and Hallie releasing themselves from the command couches. The plaz beyond them framed a seamed barrier of black rock only a few meters away, illuminated by wavering beams of artificial light. Ferry's hand moved to a control in front of him. There was a hiss near Waela's feet, then the sudden rush of cold sea wind through an open hatchway. It was night beyond those moving lights. The hatch was blocked for a moment by the entrance of two people. As though awakening from a dream, Waela recognized them. Peniel and Thomas. "Waela!" They spoke in unison, both appearing startled at the sight of her. Hallie pushed herself away from the control console, intensely aware that Peniel was focused on Waela's mounded abdomen. Neither Peniel nor the man with him, she realized, had expected to see Waela, and certainly not in the full bloom of pregnancy. "Kerro," Hallie said. He faced her, equally startled. "Hallie?" Thomas threw his head back in sudden laughter. "You see? A surprise package from ship!" Waela fumbled with the straps holding her to the couch. Hallie rushed to assist her, released the straps, and helped her off the couch. The sound of the surf was loud, and they could feel its pounding through their feet. "Hello," Waela said. She took 3 short steps up to Thomas, hugged him. Hallie tried to identify the play of emotions across the man's face. "Fear?" Peniel touched Hallie's arm. "This is Raja Thomas, leader of the army and nemesis of Morgan Oaks." "Army?" Hallie looked from Peniel to Thomas. Thomas gently released Waela's grip around his waist, steadied her while he directed a glare at Peniel. "You joke about this." "Never." Peniel shook his head. Hallie could not understand the exchange. He started to frame a question, but Thomas spoke first. "What else is in the freighter?" The Bitten program responded, a crackling voice from the overhead coder, full of baps and bursts of static, but the listing of the cargo manifest remained understandable. "Weapons," Thomas said. He ran to the open hatch, shouted something to people outside, whirled back. "We have to unload this thing before the surf breaks it up, or Oakes's people destroy it. Everybody out!" Hallie felt a touch on her shoulder. Ferry standing there.
I think I'm owed an explanation.
Even his demands were shaded in whines.
Later, Thomas said. There's a guide right outside who'll take you to our camp. She'll tell you everything you need to know. Demons? Ferry asked. Nothing like that around here, Thomas said. Now hurry it up while... You can't just dismiss him like that, Hallie protested. If it weren't for him, Murdoch would have... We'd be dead.
Peniel directed a quizzical stare at Hallie, then at Ferry. "Hallie, this old man works for Oakes, and for himself. He's an expert at the game of power politics, and he knows that we're a highly negotiable commodity."
That's all past, Ferry sputtered.
The veins in his nose stood out like worms.
Ugh. Your guide's waiting, Thomas said.
"Her name's Rue," Peniel said. "You might remember her better as Rachel Demarest's cubby mate." Ferry swallowed, started to speak, swallowed again, then...
Rachel?
Peniel shook his head slowly from side to side. A single tear formed at the corner of Ferry's right eye, slid down his veined cheek. He took a deep, trembling breath, turned and shuffled toward the hatch. All the energy and urgency he had displayed earlier were drained from him. "He really did save us," Hallie said. "I know he's a spy, but—"
"Who are you?" Thomas asked. "Who are you?" Thomas asked.
"This is Medtech Hallie Eckel," Peniel said. Hallie looked up at Thomas. So tall. His eyes held her. He appeared to be in some ageless ring of middle age, but when she took the hand he held out to her, it felt firm and youthful. A commanding hand, confident. She grew aware that Waela and